And our first session today is with Andy Mulcahy. He's Strategy and Insight Director at IMRG and has been researching and reporting on trends and developments in online retail for over a decade. So who better to help us make sense of the past year and how the pandemic has transformed e-commerce, and perhaps provide some predictions of what now lies ahead. So without much further ado, take it away, Andy.
Thanks a lot, Joseph. Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's session. So as Joseph mentioned, I'm Strategy and Insight Director at IMRG. I've worked there for 11 years. What we do is we're the trade body for online retail in the UK. So we kind of know what's going on. The reason that we know what's going on is because we have a big panel of retailers who give us their sales figures and a whole lot of performance stuff across their web. Their sales figures, so we know what's going on there. But we also get a load of sort of things like bounce rates and progression rates, conversion rates, and things like that for all sort of different parts of the website. So although I'm sure you're sick of hearing about the pandemic and you kind of know that it meant a lot of volume went online, I'm going to go into a bit more depth today with some nice, quite granular data sets that we've got. So it's not boring. Hopefully, some of this stuff, I'm pretty sure you probably aren't aware of a lot of this stuff. And I've got a lot of sort of shopper survey type stuff as well, which is going to be really looking ahead to the future. So I really hope you learn something from it, and please feel free to ask questions, and we'll try and pick up a few of them as we go through. So the first thing, I've just got 4 slides to show you here at the beginning, which is just looking at the market. So what's actually happened to the online market over the last sort of, how long has it been? 16 months, whatever it is. So this is the main one, really. This is the percentage growth in year-on-year growth in online sales over a sort of 16-month period. So the blue line there is showing you 2020, and the orange line is showing you 2021 to date so far. So we've got up to June. And as you can see, there's rather a big sort of crossover in those lines. And if you look in sort of January, February, March in 2020, you can see that before the pandemic kicked in, growth rate, a typical sort of growth rate for online was kind of between about 4 and 5% to, maybe 8 or 9%. That's where things were. And for 2019 as a whole, the market came in at about 6% up. And then in 2020, you see where the pandemic hit, loads of volume went online, and then the market was up 36% in 2020. So I'm never sure whether 36% sounds impressive as a growth figure, but if you compare it to 6%, which is where we were the year before, it's up by a sort of factor of 6 or whatever. Use your own maths there. But then you can see what's happened as we moved into 2021. So spectacularly high growth, very high growth in Q1 when we went into the third lockdown. But then they've crossed over, and the reason for that is sort of multiple, really. The first one is that because you're comparing against a very high growth rate from last year, it's just hard to grow on 60%. It's just really hard to do that. But then you also have things that are changing, which is further exacerbating the situation. So year on year, to be honest, is all over the place at the minute. So although it was down, it's down sort of 14% in June, doesn't mean there's no volume, right? The volume is still spectacularly high compared to where it was a year ago. It's just that it's a very difficult growth rate. This, however, is the line that is a very reliable line. Now, this is month-on-month growth. So year-on-year is showing you what the uplift was for March versus March the year before. What month-on-month means was more or less money spent in June relative to May. So did it increase or decrease relative to the previous month? Now, there's 3 years of data here. So it runs across January to December there. Your blue line is 2019, the orange one is 2020, and the grey one is 2021. Now, the reason that this is a very indicative measure, this one, is because retail usually has very reliable patterns of trade throughout the year. So if you look at what's going on there, you get a big spike as you get towards November, and then you get a bit of a falling away into December. So that's Black Friday and Christmas volume. Then you get a falling away into January, Christmas anymore. And then for the rest of the year, it's sort of up and down a little bit. If I was to show you the years from sort of 2016 to 2019, they would all just run really sort of parallel. Black Friday pulled things a little bit forward. But if you look at the orange line against the blue line, for example, most of the time they're running very parallel. The big difference is between March and April, when just a spectacular amount of volume went online. but then the trading patterns got back to where they were. So that's telling you loads of volume moved online, and then it stayed there. But then look what happens with the grey line, which is 2021, April, May and June, you have seen a dropping away. So the year-on-year measure is a bit unreliable at the minute. But in April, we had the stores reopening. In May, you had an easing of restrictions. In June, to be honest, even though we didn't open up properly, I sort of get the feeling that people are acting like we have. So you've got that going on. And at some point, those lines are going to reconverge. And then that tells you what the split is between online and offline in a post-pandemic world. So we're still trying to get there, but that's kind of what's going on now. But did it change any of the other stuff, right? So what happened with online? What happened was that loads and loads of people bought online, some of whom weren't doing it before, others who were a bit, and they had to do a lot more. But did it change any other metrics? So the amount spent at the checkout, average basket value. And what we've done here is we've taken a bunch of sectors that we track, and we've just added the 2019 and 2020 into the same bar. So the blue bit is 2019 and the orange bit is 2020. And we've just put a yellow line across the 50% mark. And as you can see, it's almost identical, the spend across this. So just because more people were shopping online and probably they were buying sort of different types of things, overall, it just kind of balanced itself out. So people weren't really spending more. However, look what happens when you get into 2021. So the blue bar here is the average basket value across January to December for 2020, and then the orange bar is 2021. So if I was to show you that for 2019 versus 2020, not a massive amount of difference, then balanced out over the year. 2021 so far has seen a spectacular increase in the amount of money that's spent at the checkout each time. So if you look at June, that was actually up 62% on the same month last year. Now, what's going on there? It's a slightly confusing picture, but one of the main influences seems to be that retailers are finding themselves less reliant on discounting to drive sales than they were during the pandemic. And one of the main reasons for this is that you've got this issue with stock. So basically, China is having a hell of an economic boom, manufacturing loads and loads of stuff, and they're trying to move it all around. A lot of stuff comes out of China, and getting on a pallet or in a container to come out of China at the moment is very expensive work. So consequently, huge demand plus problems with supply, you've got problems with stock. And what it means is that people seem to be buying stuff if they see it in stock. So if you particularly look at a category like garden online, which saw a massive boom during the pandemic, you really see that picture there. Because if people see a bench or one of those sort of swing chairs that you put in a tree, they just buy it. They don't go around looking for it cheaper anywhere else. Somewhere like beauty, conversely, is seeing not getting this pattern at all. And what they're seeing is that they are very reliant on discounting at the moment because the competition has intensified. A lot of D2C companies are moving into that space, and Amazon are kind of pushing it quite hard as well. So there's a whole load of different things that are going on for various categories, but on the whole, the average being spent at the checkout at the moment is shooting up astronomically. Now, to get into some of the more granular metrics that I kind of mentioned, you probably wouldn't be too familiar with a lot of this stuff. The first thing here is the customer funnel. Now, the customer funnel we define as 4 steps across a website. So if you think of all the traffic that comes to your website, the first stage of the customer funnel is the percentage of total visits that view a product page. And that blue line is showing you that there, and that's across a 2-year period. Okay, so 2019 and 2020, and it's a quarterly measure that we get. The purple one is the percentage of sessions, the orange one is the percentage of sessions that convert from a product page they basically add something to their basket. That's what they're saying from a product page. The grey one is the percentage that then convert to the checkout, and the yellow one is the percentage of sessions at the checkout that actually complete the payment. So those are your kind of market averages, if you like. But the thing that really strikes me here is those lines are completely flat, right? So they haven't shot up at all during the pandemic. So there's loads more trade online. Did it lead to people acting in different ways? No, not really. There was a little bit of a bump with the yellow one in Q2 of 2020, where it's about 6 percentage points higher than it was for the same quarter the year before. But then it's just kind of flattened out again, really. So an initial bump, but then it's just flattened out again. So didn't really see much of a change in behaviour at the checkout. This is site search usage. So what it's saying is the percentage of visitors that come to your site that go and use the on-site search, that type a query into it and execute that search. And typically it runs between sort of 15 to 20%. Changes, it goes up and down a little bit across the year. 2018 is blue, 2019 is orange, and 2020 is grey. There is one massive sort of skyscraper there in Q4 for 2019. So that was kind of a Black Friday thing that year. A little bit of an anomaly, I think, probably in the overall data here. But if you look at the grey bar 2020 versus 2018, 2019, it's not miles out of kilter with it. So again, it didn't really lead to loads more people using site search. So that didn't really change either. Now this is site search exit rate. So if you imagine you execute a query, you get to the results page, and then you leave without doing anything else. That's what that means. And as you can see, it typically hovers around sort of 13 to 15%. So again, you've got 3 years of data there. Hardly any difference really at any point. But in Q1 of 2020, Q1, by the way, is February to April in our measures. So it's a traditional retail calendar, where Q4 is November, December, January to take the whole sort of Christmas period. And as you can see, there was actually a very big jump there. So we think that's probably related to people trying to find things and just not finding it because of such pressure on stock during that first lockdown that they then just bounced off to another site to try and find it. But then it didn't really carry through. So again, that's not really a behaviour that's kind of changed. But this is one where you'll see it change. So this is the homepage start, bounce, and exit rate. So homepage bounce rate is the blue one. What that means is they bounce off on the homepage. So they come into the homepage and then they just leave. They don't do anything else. Not been a massive change in that one. The homepage exit rate is the orange one. What that means is they might have gone to other pages in your site, but then they leave via the homepage. And again, up and down a little bit, but not too much going on. This is 3 years of data you've seen, by the way, 2018, 2019, 2020, and the red dotted line is showing you the separation between the years. Now, the grey one is the interesting one. This is the homepage start rate, and that is a definite downward trajectory. So yes, during 2020, it's gone down a bit more than it did the previous 2 years, but it was on a downward trajectory anyway. So what that means is the percentage of traffic that start on your homepage, and that is going down. So that's something that's been accelerated by the pandemic, but it wasn't necessarily created by the pandemic. And that really is the message that I think you could take away from this. Conversely, this is the product page start and exit rate. So particularly look at the orange bar there. So this is the percentage of visits to your site that start on a product page. So might have come through Google or through Facebook or something like that. But they haven't gone to the home page, they've gone directly onto a product page. And that is trending upwards. So again, it's a trend that was going on before the pandemic actually started, and it's just been pushed up by it a little bit more. So that really is looking at all we track loads and loads of data. That's one of the ones that really is changing a bit. A lot of stuff didn't really change a great deal, or it just had an initial flip and then it went back to where it was before. So that's some hard data. What I want to do now is I'm going to show you the results from a series of surveys that we've carried out. There's 4 different surveys in here, just to give you a view of what people's perceptions are, what they're planning on doing, what they want from retail. And you do see a few interesting things in this one. So the first one here, this is a very confusing slide, but this is from a company called Maru, who we work with. They carry out research. They do all sorts of different stuff. So they do surveys, but they also do some quite interesting stuff like this. Now, it's a bit confusing, but the thing to look at is the pictures along the bottom there. We've got the elephant and the kid in the pool and all that. And what they do here is they're looking for an emotional response to something. So what they do is they say, we want to understand how you feel about home delivery. And then they'll show you a series of pictures and say, click on the pictures to indicate how you feel about this. And the type of pictures that they clicked on in 2019, thinking about home delivery, how people sort of felt about it was that they didn't feel in control, right? So they weren't too sure that they were able to control the situation. And you know what it's like, you're at work, you come back and your parcel's on your doorstep. You're happy it's there, but also you think that could have been stolen. But they did experience kind of sense of joy at getting something. So you order something, it turns up, great, I'm happy. And think of all the unboxing videos and things that you get on YouTube, just to illustrate that point for you. Fast forward to 2021, and there's been a change, right? So I know this is a bit confusing to look at, but What's happened now is that people feel a bit more in control of the situation because we're at home a lot more. Getting stuff first time is not as much of a problem, but they do feel that the joy has gone out of it a little bit. So if you think about what we were doing before, you might get a certain number of parcels sent to your house. It become a bit more routine, I think, because of the pandemic, and therefore the sort of fun associated with, oh, there's that thing that I bought, has been rather sapped. And I think this is a very, very important point for us moving forward, because retail is supposed to be fun. It's supposed to get joy out of buying things, experiencing stuff, and that just seems to have come down a little bit. So you might want to think about how you ramp that up a little bit more. This is looking at what COVID is an acceptable excuse for. So there's sort of, for all these bars here, there are three colours. So the red colour is it's not acceptable at all. Light blue is it's slightly acceptable, and dark blue is it's a very acceptable excuse. So on the right-hand side there, where people tend to think it's a bit more acceptable to use COVID as an excuse, it's things like limited stock on items. So there seems to be reasonably understanding of that there has been a problem with supply and distribution. Longer delivery lead times, so it's going to take a bit longer to get this. But at the same time, look on the left-hand side, late delivery is number 3. So I can understand a longer lead delivery time, so it's going to take 5 days to get to you. But if it doesn't take 5 days, it takes 7, then I'm annoyed. And that actually is something that's been true throughout the whole period we've been tracking this stuff. People are always annoyed about that. As long as if you make a promise to them and you come good on it, they're happy. But the other things that they really don't want to have as an excuse are things like higher prices, longer time to process a return or a refund or whatever. So definite things to bear in mind there. And this is one that kind of goes back to the one I presented a couple of slides ago. So again, this is still Maru. And this is how they feel compared to last year. So this was in December 2020, when, if you remember, it really was a very bleak period there, where we knew we lost Christmas, and we had to go into a third lockdown and all this sort of stuff. Numbers weren't very good. But look at what happened with how people feel. Right? So the bubbles along the top are saying the percentage that said that they felt that emotion. But then the bar is telling you the difference in them. So actually, despite all the misery and the horror, 6% more were feeling fortunate, 7% more were feeling optimistic, 5% more safe. And frustrated and anxious had gone down actually quite a lot. Now, it might be that's very much in relation to a vaccine being invented around that time. But we had this kind of messaging that we had to do during the pandemic, where it was very much, we're on your side, we're here to support you kind of things, very reassuring. Whereas now I wonder, back to the point about retail supposed to be fun, maybe we need to sort of amend that language a little bit and start to encourage people a bit more, to kind of allow them to have a bit of fun. If you look at all the stuff that's gone around it, so the sort of economic gloom and everything, I think some of that isn't quite as bad as maybe the expectation was. So, there's maybe the good times are coming. Who knows? We want to try and tap into that bit. This is switching to a different survey now. This is the home delivery survey that we do. We do it every year. We've done it for 12 years. We ask 1,000 people a bunch of questions, loads and loads of different questions. And this one is, has a good delivery experience ever encouraged you to buy from a particular retailer again? And the blue bar there is yes. And it's very high back in 2012. But it has come down, and as a trend line, that is the most reliable, consistent downward trajectory you could possibly imagine. So while it used to be the case that you could kind of win people over with that, it has come down a lot. Now it's still at about 60%, it's still pretty good, but I think on the whole, a lot of the services have sort of come up to the same level now. So it isn't something that you can just major on by adding a certain carrier or something like that. You've got to work harder in order to kind of inspire people. This is from the same survey. This won't surprise you, but where do you normally have items delivered? So, what's your preferred kind of pickup or drop-off point? And home is the bottom one there with just the huge bars on them. And that's a 4-year period. So 2017 is the blue one through to 2020, which is the yellow one. So all that's happened really is we had a massive preference for home delivery, and now it's just even higher than it was. So it's at about 94% now. People say they want stuff delivered to their home. So very problematic, I think, for things like click and collect, which was reasonably popular before, was very popular actually for some retailers. And now I think that's a bit of a difficult thing, really. If you're at home a lot more, why do you need to go out and get it? And then this is about speed of delivery. And I think this is one of those issues where we've created this rod for our own back, where we're telling people they've just got to have things really fast all the time. And I'm going to get onto sustainability in just a second because there's an obvious conflict with that. So how long do you think it should take for sort of standard delivery options to arrive? And actually, most people think 3 days is fair enough. So nearly 40% of them said that. 2 days is 27% or something like that. So the ones that are really fast, like next working day and next day, they're sort of 6, 7, 8%. But at the same time, we're pushing all the time that we're going to do things faster. So I think we're sort of creating a problem for ourselves when this is one of those times when people aren't actually asking for this. They're kind of happy with how things are, but we're going to push them further and further. And of course, if you can get something faster, you just want it faster. So we're kind of making problems for ourselves here, I feel. This is a returns policy. Now, if you cast your mind back to when the pandemic kicked in, a lot of retailers, so we looked at about 300, and over half of them had extended their returns policy. So they said during the lockdown, we used to offer 14 days, you can have 60 to send something back to us. So we just asked the question here, what policy do you think people should actually offer? And the majority actually think that 28 days is a good phase. So an interesting thing to think about there, because we've looked at returns in quite a lot of detail. And actually, if you offer a really long return period, it doesn't mean you get loads of returns towards the end of that period. The majority of the returns still come back in the first week and the second week, and then it kind of peters out for the rest of the time. So really, you should look at returns policy not as being a sort of indicator of when you're going to get stuff back, but a retention tool, if you like, or an acquisition tool. Now, this is moving into the sustainability bit. So I mentioned about speed there and how we're always trying to do things faster and all this kind of thing, but it does sort of rub up against our sort of promises of sustainability as well. So again, this is asking 1,000 people a bunch of questions about their perceptions of business sustainability. And in this one, there's actually 2 questions in one. So it's which of these do you think is having the biggest negative impact on the environment? And I'm afraid if you're a fashion retailer, you are 4th in this group. So you're only behind air travel providers, petrochemical providers, and automotive providers. So, not a great image there. But then the ones that are doing the most, so which types of business are doing the most about it? Fashion retailers don't rank very highly on that one either. So quite a difficult situation, I think, for a fashion retailer to be in. You have got to kind of do something about that. And then this one here, again, this is a bit of a tricky one for clothing, but this is asking, to what extent do people really think about this kind of thing when they're deciding which brand to buy from? And so you've got a bunch of stuff there. And the yellow bar is that it wasn't a factor at all. And the blue one is, it's the biggest single factor in my decision. And then you've got a few in the middle there that are somewhere in between. So something like eating out at a restaurant, for example, people just don't really think about that. But things like buying a kitchen appliance, well, that is actually a big deal for someone, So if you think about those energy ratings on washing machines and stuff like that, maybe that's something that needs to come really to the fore in the marketing. And purchase new clothing is kind of somewhere in the middle of all that. Interestingly, just behind book to fly. But we asked a question here, and I think the one mistake that we did make with this one is we should have had a none of the above or an other for this answer. But we said, where should retailers focus on to improve their sustainability credentials, if you like? And bearing in mind, this is 1,000 respondents. 100% of them said they should use less packaging. I guess the packaging thing, the thing with sustainability is it's a very difficult thing to explain to someone. You've got to basically talk about chemicals in the air with incredibly long names. Whereas if you see a bit of plastic packaging, it's like, well, just get rid of that packaging and then it's sustainable. I think they kind of understand that. They don't understand the stuff in the sky. So if you're thinking about where can we start, that's a really good place to start if you want to please your customers. And how long have you got to do it? Well, they're not that understanding, really. So you've got in the next 5 years. So that how long do you think? What is a reasonable target for retailers to become carbon neutral or carbon negative? So the blue one is carbon neutral. So they're saying next 5 years, really. But you've got 10 years to become carbon negative. So that's very understanding of them, isn't it? And then this one here is, which of the following best describes how you shop with a retailer who visibly makes little or no effort to improve their performance in this area? And most people there are saying, well, I'd shop with them less often rather than I would completely change how I shop. So really the sort of summary to this sustainability bit is people are saying that they're really bothered about it, and they're saying that they would adapt their behaviour based on it. You've got to be honest, I don't know whether they are doing that yet. But at some point, if they're all saying, yeah, I'm this really sort of ethically conscious, environmentally sound sort of person, are they actually going to suddenly move into that space? Well, at some point you feel it will happen, because you'll get companies that will be really good at doing this stuff. And if you're not really good and then they've got to make a decision, well, then that's kind of where they're going to go. I've only just got a couple more slides to show you now, and this is about the number of options that are offered at the checkout. So we had an event a couple of weeks ago, and we had 40 sort of e-commerce directors at this event, and we just asked them a series of questions. One of them was whether they're looking to increase the number of payment methods they offer at the checkout in the next 12 months. And as you can see, definitely adding new methods and potentially adding new methods was very, very big in that response there. So just over 3/4 of them said yes, they are looking to do that. Either definitely or potentially. And I think this is something that we definitely see happening at the moment, is that people retailers are really looking at how they can offer more stuff, as suggested by this one as well. So what are the top delivery challenges you foresee in the second half of the year? Now the big one there is cross-border shipping. IOS, if you know what that is, it's basically a one-stop shop. It's kind of a tax declaration type thing. So cross-border has become massively more confusing, really, for obvious reasons. I just get to the end of this without mentioning Brexit, but here we are. But the second one there, which is on 40%, was increasing conversion with delivery options at the checkout. So again, more delivery options, even though a lot of people just want stuff delivered to their home. More choice is something that retailers are definitely kind of investing in at the moment. And I think that kind of brings me to the end of that. So thank you for listening to me. I hope that you took something from that. And I suppose that the main message, just to reiterate it really, is that the pandemic didn't really change a great deal in a lot of ways. It just sped stuff up that was already kind of happening. There's been very little that it completely invented and pushed people into a different sphere. I think that there are certain challenges coming with how people perceive things and their expectations that might have gone through a bit more of a leap and require a little bit more focus. Happy to take some questions or anything, if anyone.
Yes, Andy, we've definitely got a few questions coming through. Just a quick one to get the ball rolling here. I think this is probably just a quick clarification, really. It's just, first of all, asking, does your research cover any particular region? Is this just UK data, or is it further afield?
Yes, it's all UK. So the hard data, the sales figures and the customer funnel and site navigation, and all that, that's UK websites. Now it might be that it'll be the .co.uk website if that's your domain. It could be someone in France or Germany using it. The majority of it though will be domestic people, and then the survey results, the customer survey stuff was all UK respondents.
Yeah. And the graph you started with was showing how the easing is starting to have an impact on spending patterns there. Do you think we've seen the release of the so-called kind of pent-up demand, and that's maybe happening gradually, or do you think there's still a big burst to come?
With the pandemic, I keep waiting for it to fall into a nice little predictable pattern. It sort of did that in 2020 after the initial shock, to be honest. But then 2021, I knew this was going to be the year that would be really unpredictable and weird. And what's kind of happening at the moment is you are seeing a drop in spend. That's true. But I don't think it's all going back to the high street. I think it's when you're locked down, you can't do anything, right? So you're not taking a train, you're not going on holiday, you're not going out for a meal, you're not going to the pub, you're not going to a theme park or anything like that. And once people get the opportunity to do that, then they do sort of take it. So some of that spend that was ring fenced for online is just going off on top of things. So you kind of know that would happen. But I think at some point you're going to see the rebalancing. If you remember those month-on-month lines, they're going to become parallel again. I would have expected that to happen very soon. That my difficulty with that one is we're about to go through this mass isolation period because people are vaccinated. They're kind of easing the restrictions. People are going to go out. It's going to spread like wildfire. But over the next 6 to 8 weeks or whatever it is, you're going to get pinged to say you've just been somewhere where someone had COVID, therefore you've got to isolate. And I think that they're expecting, I think the number I saw was something like 4 million people would probably have to isolate over the next six weeks or so. So being in isolation is not being at home, working from home. You can't leave your house. So in a way, you're sort of reinventing the lockdown. So I think if that didn't happen and you just seen things open up and everything was going okay, I think those lines would converge and then you say, right, okay, so that's the online volume now, reliably, and that's the rest of it. But I think you're in for a rocky couple of months, I think, at least to the end of August, and then we'll see what happens from there.
Yeah. And I'm guessing, we've got, the so-called Freedom Day next week. I'm guessing, there's an element there of the unknown, like you say. Do you think retailers are maybe still taking a short-term view to their strategies because there is still that kind of unknown there?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very difficult one for them to, you wouldn't want to be a retail buyer, I think, over the last sort of 12 months or so, because what you'd normally do is you'd buy something months and months in advance to get the stock in time. And when things are so unpredictable, particularly if you're sort of, trying to sell clothing or shoes or something, which you've had a terrible time, you're sort of gambling quite a lot on that stuff. I wonder to some extent whether some retailers are now going to be focused on other lines, which maybe they weren't very well known for before, but actually sold a bit of that stuff during the pandemic and become a little bit more known for it. So you might see a slightly different mix with some companies.
So some of those retailers could be moving into areas that maybe not done before, but I suppose there's also potentially still a risk that some of those brands, some of those businesses still holding on there might still be a final hurdle that they don't clear, I imagine.
Yeah, possibly. And I think everyone's got a bit of stock laying around that you can't really get rid of. So, for example, if you've been selling electrical items, you've probably sold quite a lot of electrical items online, because people were stuck at home, but you certainly didn't sell any ironing boards. And you've then got to do something with those ironing boards at some point. So, Black Friday, here we come, I guess. So you're going to get a good deal on an ironing board.
And Andy, just a few questions about, thinking about the market, about the customers here. You showed those entrance graphs, and they were switching a lot more emphasis, seemingly like off-brand and onto deeper searches. There is there going to be a need for people to maybe be paying more attention or switching their strategy back towards kind of looking at long tail SEO and landing page design? There, do you think?
You've got Google presenting today, I think. Did you say?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so I spoke to them last week. I think that's a fantastic question for them, really. I will go to their session because obviously they know all about long-tail keywords, and they can maybe give you some information as to sort of how those trends are going. But they'll definitely be able to give you a better answer on that.
And then just the last one I want to ask you about is that idea of fun. The pandemic's driven a lot of innovation, and there's been some really interesting stuff done there, and hopefully we get to see retailers continuing that. Do you think that's going to be the next battleground then? Because people talk about getting into real shops as being an experiential thing. Do you think the pure plays have to look up in their game there?
I'm reasonably cynical about a lot of that stuff, to be honest. I think you get, you'll get somebody and they'll put something on their website. Maybe they'll put something in a store and it's some, tablet or something that you can go and play with and do whatever. But if you actually speak to a lot of retailers about, okay, so I saw that thing on your website, I see you're trialing this new innovation. Does anyone use it? Quite often the answer is No. So, but a lot of people will say a lot of stuff about, oh, we're doing this thing. And when they're in the public domain, they'll say, oh, we're bringing this in to really give this great experience to our customers. But you've really got to understand the usage for that. If you really want something to work, you've got to make sure that people actually want it and that they're going to use it. You really need to get behind it. But I think in a way we sort of go for innovation sometimes just because we think that seems like a good idea, but then people don't actually use it.
Well, thanks so much, Andy, for the talk, and thanks so much for taking those extra few questions at the end. I really appreciate it.